Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Moore, your host, and I have with me today a very special guest, Susanna Mäentausta from Kemira. Susanna, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm delighted to be here today.
Excellent. Susanna, now of course I'm quite familiar with you and I've seen some of your presentations, but for those who aren't familiar with you, can you share a little bit about your background, how you got started in PLM, and maybe a little about Kemira as well?
Sure. If I start with myself, I've spent most of my career in chemical industry and namely in the product safety, regulatory and advocacy, but always with a global teams and cross-organizational focus. And with these roles, I started to see always the same pains, and then the common denominator there was always that there was lack of change management somehow that created a lot of frustrations and troubles in the organizations. And that was the same at Kemira, where I've been now for the last 10 years. But seeing always the struggles for new people coming in and not knowing how to deal with different changes, for example, then I became sort of the main advocate within the company to promote the idea that we really need to do this right, and sort of got involved with the PLM and then ultimately became the program lead for our big project.
It's very cool. And of course, at Kemira, you guys have a pretty big focus on sustainability. It's all over the website. Has PLM helped you with your unique goals in that area?
That's a good question. And I think it's a bit maybe even the other way around, that I think because of our sustainability focus and large portion of our investors are having that high on their agenda to look at corporate responsibility and sustainability, that made it easier for us to understand and justify that. Why do we need to do this right? And I think it's been actually helping us to go through that PLM journey, because the sustainability focus has helped us in that. But I guess it's the other way around as well. So neither one goes sort of alone.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that collaborative relationship between the two elements, and that's really great to hear. It's a great mission for the company too. Now, of course, one of the things that some people may be familiar with is that you did present at one of the PI PLMX conferences, and you talk a lot about keeping the momentum with a PLM journey. And one slide really kind of struck me right from the get-go, and that was this idea of PLM is all about mindset change in the organization. Tell me a little bit about that.
I could probably talk about that for a day, but I'll try to keep it short. I think it all starts with the fact that PLM processes as business processes are typically very diverse, in the sense that they touch different parts of the organizations. They go all the way through the different parts of the company, but they are never on the surface, but they sort of are beneath the day-to-day transactional operational activities. And it's maybe not that well seen that why it's so crucial, but in the end, it's actually enabling a lot of the processes on the surface then to perform better. And that kind of leads to the fact that unless people understand why are we doing it, you won't succeed very well. And on the other side, in the PLM process, it's all about streamlining the end-to-end for the product. Information flows, approvals, changes. And once you're optimizing the end-to-end, it's never about everybody winning. Mm-hmm. There will be teams who have more work to do, who are not going to be happy. And there are teams who are maybe more happier because it's easier for them. But keeping the whole organization aligned, it's about the common decision that we need this is why we need it, and this is the way forward, how we go it together. And it's especially important for the management to understand that how do they need to lead their parts of the organization, as it's not everybody wins in that kind of a harmonized, aligned framework. And I think that's the essence why we ended up with this conclusion that it's really all about the mindset in the organization, that we've decided that this is good for us because it helps us in the overall goals and And we understand that it's not always easy, but we still stick to it because of that reason, what we've identified.
Absolutely. And I can certainly understand how for some people that are helping support this project, like you mentioned, they're going to have more work because they went from kind of operating in a bit of a box to now actually having to think about that end-to-end process that you just outlined. Yeah. So that makes sense to me. And in your slides, in support of that idea about, getting people on board and helping them go through this change mindset, there's some concepts that you have that I see repeated pretty frequently. And those are communication, presence, and vision. Can you share with us a little bit about those core elements?
Sure. I think the communication piece to start with is very, very closely related to that mindset. That it's sort of a topic that you need to constantly repeat and kind of explain that why and what is it for and how does it change our way of doing things. And you need to do that on all the layers of the organization, but the different layers don't necessarily need the same message, but they need to be having the message baked into their day-to-day world and something that resonates, that why should I care type of thing. And during the 4-year project journey that we had, I think the main mantra was that communicate, communicate, communicate. And once you think you're done, then you start over. Because for the fact that it's really the under the surface type of a process, it's not the first priority for most of the people who are involved. And they might hear it, but it's not in their key priorities. So you need to keep on repeating that it becomes like familiar and known, and it stays in people's minds. And that's I think all the way through. And it's after the project mode as well. You need to keep that communication, which leads us to that presence. That how do you ensure that the PLM as a theme, as a way of working, stays in that day-to-day after the project mode? Because obviously once you have the project, it's rather natural that it's been followed up, the management is interested, we're communicating to the stakeholders. But once the project is over, it's very, very easy, it just kind of disappears. You don't see it, you don't hear about it, and then your cultural change journey actually stops. Or at least it slows down because it's no longer there. And if you're not seeing it, if you're not hearing it, it's not there, It's kind of, I don't need to care about it.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really the presence, that how do you hardwire the presence into that after project mode in your organization, that we've tried to do a good piece of homework for us to figure out what's the right way for our company to deal with that in terms of going forwards.
Okay. And with that, with keeping the momentum, you talk about the communication, continue to communicate, never stop communicating, keep it forefront in people's minds. How do you figure out what the next thing is? What is the next step on your vision? How do you keep going after those first steps are done and everybody's kind of like, whew, we did a lot?
Yeah, that's also something that we built in together with the presence into the governance model. So I think that's all about that. People hear governance and it sounds a bit boring, but in essence, that's your engine to keep that continued improvement then kind of going on, even though there's no project anymore, or there are maybe smaller projects, but not kind of big transformational project. And how we approach it is to first ask the question that how do we keep the presence of PLM on different layers of the organization? And then how does that go along with the continued improvements, that how do we make it? And I would maybe summarize that there are 2 key elements as I see crucial factors for going forwards. First of all, it's the PLM process owner role that traditionally may have not been always so obvious that you need one. It's sort of another business process amongst the others. But for the nature, again, going back to that being a bit under surface and going across all the organizations, I would say that's even more important to have a skilled and focused process owner for PLM. because that kind of puts together all the different elements around the PLM topic and should carry the overall responsibility to gather all that feedback and signals together. Mm-hmm. And then building around that process owner role a kind of condensed team of experts who then all together carry the, let's say, in-depth understanding that how do the different pieces of PLM go along in our company is kind of the core of all of that. And how we sort of approached it was that the governance team is then the engine to look for what are the areas to improve, how does it reflect to the big picture, and then how do we prioritize?
That makes a lot of sense to me. It almost sounds like you're saying that as long as you continue communicating, you keep the ideas and the presence there, that even as your journey or your vision evolves, as you accomplish certain steps, that momentum kind of takes care of itself as long as you keep it present.
Yeah, I guess that's the essence, but I would also have the other way around, that I think it needs to be clear in the governance that we're not changing because of the sake of you need to just continuously improve.
Yes.
But you should also keep in mind that you only change when there's enough evidence. And that comes back to the nature of the PLM again, that as you're optimizing the end-to-end, listening to the end users and looking for their wishes is very important, but you always need to be able to put that into the context. That if you change one piece, do you create an impact for the overall? Do you only satisfy that one piece but generate troubles in other parts? Or is it kind of something in between? And then you put them into priority, because it's also easy then to exhaust the organization, that you first change the whole way of working and then you kind of keep on changing without the end user seeing the big difference in the outcome. So it's a bit of a two-edged topic on the continuous improvements, that you need to be sensitive also on the cultural side, that how much you kind of keep on pushing whilst people are still on the cultural change learning curve.
I really like that. And I like that you put the evidence in focus with the people, because we do really share a common opinion in that, technology is just an enabler, but it's really all about the people. And those are some really great tips about keeping people at the center of your focus and not changing for the sake of change, and allowing them to digest the change that is happening. Do you have other tips about keeping people in focus?
Well, I think the other particular insight that I've gained along the process relates to the communication and how important it is after the official launch of your PLM initiative to keep on communicating, because I see that big part of the cultural change comes from once people are using the new system, then you start hearing some maybe beliefs that, it didn't really change anything, or it's taking so much longer, and then you really need to replace these beliefs with facts. And that's what your PLM should enable you to do, really. That you should now really have the facts, that how good or bad is your process, what are the measures to improve it, and kind of shooting down the beliefs with facts will be one of the most powerful ways to kind of catalyze that mindset change in the organization. And I think that's far the most kind of important insight from the first years after the launch.
So that's really interesting. How do you support belief with facts? Do you do it with like reporting or meetings or end results to the business? Like, what's the best tip?
I would say that we are still on the early steps of building all the kind of gadgets or monitoring devices around that and how to best communicate. But the early start was really simply looking into process throughput times through different process scenarios. That, let's take an example that you have a product being launched in a new market area, and how long does it take? And then you hear the beliefs that, oh, well, earlier it only took a day, and then you just made a call and it was there. And then you need to kind of build the whole story that now our process shows that from step one until the end, it takes this much that comes directly from process reporting. And then you kind of complement that with the storyline that, hey, but you can't compare that 1 day to that 20 days, because that 1 day was comprised only of someone switching an ERP switch that you can sell something.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the end, everybody was running behind that. You had some regulatory checks, and you might have some brochures and some documentation and some bills of materials that needed updating, but that never showed up to the requester in the old world, because you didn't have the overall pipeline. And now you actually have transparency, and you need to kind of walk the whole chain through. But having the facts helps you to just tell that story. This earlier was just the story, and now you back it up with the system and show that how the whole flow goes.
That's excellent. That's a great way to keep perception from becoming reality.
And it's very, very natural in organizations where
Yes.
the PLM obviously is not in the center for most of the roles, but that's kind of part of their day-to-day that just needs to get done. To get that biased thing that you have one challenging change process, and then it takes forever, and then you start talking about it, and then your colleague starts kind of taking that as a fact, and it sort of evolves like a broken phone type of an effect. And if you don't have that presence in the organization to hear that and then respond to that in a positive way,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of growing enormously and super easily. So that's something that I see is very easy to overlook unless you make a conscious decision that you need the governance to support on that.
That's amazing. Susanna, this has really been excellent. Do you have any final words of wisdom or tips to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, I would maybe share my favorite metaphor for PLM, as that's been something that helped me to convey the message for the upper management in many places where it was not so clear for them that what do we really mean with PLM. And that's my metaphor, that PLM after the project is like a toddler, kind of a young kid that's running pretty steadily, that if you let it run, it kind of runs. But what happens if you leave the toddler without a guardian is that, yeah, well, for a while it might be good, but God knows then it gets hit by a car, jumps out of the window, whatsoever. Anyway, it's either a smaller or bigger disaster. And that's why you need the governance that keeps kind of the toddler on the right way and guides and helps the toddler to grow up. And that's how the PLM kind of cultural mindset grows in the organization. And I think that's been kind of awesome to see that it helps people to relate that why do we really need to kind of take care of it after it already got implemented.
You can't just leave it on its own after it's born.
Yeah. Yeah, you sort of
excellent.
have the intensive care as nurturing it and feeding it, but as soon as it runs, just don't leave it alone.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much, Susanna, for your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure, and I've enjoyed it. So thanks for being here, inviting me here.
My pleasure. And to all of our viewers, if you enjoyed this content, please remember to hit the like and subscribe button so you'll be alerted the next time we release new content. Have a question that you'd like to see addressed here? Drop your comments below or send me an email at jmo@minerva-plm.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day. All right. We're good. So what happens next?